So today for Bciu 113B, we are going to be covering live tweeting. We're going to delve into some simple stuff first. What does live tweeting mean? Obviously, every time we tweet something, it's live. However, live tweeting refers to real-time coverage of an event. So not just saying, hey, I'm here, there's this accident, there's a picture, but step-by-step covering what's going on during the event, the rec, etc. So just diving into a couple of Twitter definitions that we've gone through a little bit, but we'll go over again. Handle is your username on Twitter or other folks' username. Hashtag is literally the pound sign followed by a word, typically used for location, topical, etc. Periscope is a live video platform that we use to work with Twitter. And @replies are responses to folks, other folks that are on Twitter or kind of tagging them in posts. Any questions about those kind of basics?
Everyone get this?
All right, so live tweeting or standards for live tweeting are very similar no matter what the event is, whether it's a sports game, a press conference, a breaking news, or a trial. Couple things before you go, and this is just kind of good beat coverage in general, but you want to make sure that you know who's going to be at the event, that you're following them on Twitter, that you maybe have interacted with them before the event or before the item. Like if you're doing cops and courts, make sure you're following all the PIOs if they're on Twitter, and that you've chatted them on Twitter and kind of seen how they respond and how quickly they respond to things. And then engage with folks before you go out to an event. So don't just say, hey, I'm going to follow Sue because Sue's speaking at this event. I'm going to follow her 5 minutes before I go. No, follow her, say, hey, I'm a reporter with the Herald, et cetera, if you haven't called them beforehand. Just reach out. It's like anything on social. Be a part of the community before you need them. And that's part of being social on a social network. And then whenever you're going to do a live tweeting of an event, let folks know beforehand. So if Jess is going to live tweet a meeting tonight, then she needs to go out and say, hey, don't forget this meeting's tonight. I'll be live tweeting it. Make sure you check back. And then if there's a hashtag for the event, make sure you know what that is before you head out so that you can add it to all of your tweets. Yeah.
So one of the things we're starting to try to do more, and we need to do more of, just done a couple, is if you know you're going to go to a meeting and you're going to be live tweeting, you want to get something online in the morning. It's basically a couple of sentences of an advancer. The county is going to be meeting and talking about Gold King Miner or use tax or whatever they're going to be doing. Check back later for more on the meeting, and follow Jessica Pace at blah 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 for live tweeting. We're trying to put those up. We talked a little bit about this last week, I think, when you were out. Trying to get more and more of those up. It won't be for everything, but things, because some things are more interesting than others, but especially if it's a hot topic, we want to do that. So then you can tweet out the link to that story, and you've done double duty of tweeting, engaging your audience, and linking to the
Bringing people to the site.
And then they know they can come back and see what you're going to report later. So it's just to keep them watching us all over the place.
So speaking of that, the other thing that needs to be determined before you ever head out to your story is whether the event is important enough that we need to set up a widget on the website. And when I say a widget on the website, I mean it's code that pulls in all of your tweets. And so this is an older one that we did, and it's obviously the tweets are dated, but this is one we did with Ann during the caucuses. And of course it's not going to load because my internet's awesome. So what we do is we give it a headline for this, this special event, and then we decide what we're going to pull in, whether it's hashtags or just your tweets or et cetera, et cetera. And so we did this for the caucus, and it's continued to update like Twitter does, which is why they seem not caucus related at this time. So if the event is important enough that our audience is going to be engaged and we don't have time to be live reporting on the website, this takes me about 5 minutes to do. I just need to know in as much advance as possible, and we'll get it on there, and then folks can follow live on our website if they're not on Twitter. Because I think you guys all know a huge percentage of the population is not on Twitter. So that's a way to hit our core audience and with coverage there as well. So a couple of just kind of tips and tricks during the event, and it's really easy to start just saying what people are asking or what's going on. But remember that the reason you're live tweeting is because people can't be there. They're following you because they want to be there and they can't be there. So really try to give them a sense of space, not just, hey, Shane's asking this question and Dean Brooke is answering it with this. You want to actually say, what's the scene like? You know, there's 100 people in this small room and it's crowded and you can smell the sweat. Use your 5 senses. Tell people what it's like. You know, you're in an empty room. There's nobody here, you know. David's voice is echoing as he asks a question because nobody's there. Make people feel like they're there. Use those 5 senses. And don't always be just kind of straight, particularly if you get there early and have time to kind of set the scene. Try to always use at least one hashtag, ideally, of course, one associated with the event, and so that people can easily find their tweets if they're trying to find you, to track you or track that event. And then during the event, keep an eye out for different trends, key moments. If the mood is shifting, those are the kinds of things that don't always get conveyed when you're just kind of tweeting exactly what's happening. If the mood is shifting and it seems like there are more people that are against the issue instead of for the issue, you know, kind of share that information with your audience that's not there. And then really try to use quotes, particularly when there's something powerful. Hopefully you're writing down those quotes anyway, so tweet them out. Quotes really make people feel like they're there and they're in the moment. And then make sure you connect with others. If people ask you questions on Twitter, if they send you direct messages, really try to respond as quickly as you can. Ideally during the event, obviously that's not always possible, but if you can, please do so. Again, being social on a social network is what it's all about. So while you're covering the event, keep in your mind, and I think you guys do this all the time anyway, what is your story lead? And try to, you know, convey that in the 140 characters. And that's a good way to kind of live tweet throughout instead of just doing real time, like they're asking this question, they're asking that question. Constantly keep in mind what your story lead is and if it's changing. You know, if at first you think the story lead is going to be that 200 people showed up and 200 people showed up and then half an hour into it they're all gone, your lead has changed because they all left in a huff. So just keep thinking through what your lead is, and that makes it a little bit easier to tweet more of an overall nut graph instead of just, hey, this is happening now, this is happening now, this is happening now. And in that rare event where you have something that really needs to be much longer than 140 characters, feel free to use multiple tweets. And I don't suggest doing that a lot because it's a little bit overwhelming to the reader, but if there's something that's really important, you know, if you're out at the scene of a double fatal and you get a great quote from the Bciu or a family member on the scene, you know, and you want to do that whole quote, feel free to put it in a couple different tweets and get it out there. So, you know, powerful is powerful no matter how long it goes. So when you write your tweets, picture Sue chopping them. Chopping them. Keep your tweets as concise as you can. Really keep to the point and try to only include the most important information. And be as visual as you can. Add photos, add short videos, Periscope the events. Not next week, obviously, because we're off, but in 2 weeks from now, we're going to dive into live video. Not on the calendar. And really dive into the different ways we can do live video, and Periscope is obviously one of those, so you guys will walk away from that being a lot more well-versed in Periscope and when and how to use it. And then last but not least, and I think particularly with meetings, sometimes we struggle with this because they can be dull, be interesting. Find the interesting tidbits. And, you know, when you're live tweeting a meeting, they're not happening all the time, so you're not going to be, you know, spot on interesting all the time, but really try to highlight what is interesting during an event. And then
Can I jump in
Oh, of course.
before we get to after the event? In the case of, and I want us to get to this point, and I don't see that our tweets are quite there yet, but in the case that we have a really hot topic going on somewhere, the airport could develop into that, something else, we have a meeting about that that's packed, super fun, you know, we probably could have done this, we have breaking news if you're out on the scene of a, you know, and even for photographers, Jerry could have tweeted the other day when it was a confirmed fatal, and then I can put that online here in the office. I would like everyone to think about me building a story from your tweets, not you coming back and sorting through them and, you know, taking quotes and things, but the editor having the ability to write something. You know, I know you're at the scene of a homicide or a grass fire that's threatening homes, you're tweeting stuff that I can add to a story here, because then you don't have to worry about it. And we're giving multiple audiences updated information. So think about that when you're creating your tweets, that can somebody take this and make sense out of it enough to add it to a story? Which means if you quote someone, you need first and last name. And it needs to be spelled right. And correct tweets if they're wrong, because sometimes that happens. Oops, got that wrong, it should have said this, or you can tweet again, or you can, sometimes just tweeting again is easier than trying to edit it, but.
And remember, our policy is it's okay to delete those tweets as long as you retweet, hey, my last tweet was an error, here's the correct info. Because we don't want bad information out there.
So if there's a breaking news kind of thing, or a really hot thing going on, I'll be monitoring, I have a Durango Herald, so your tweets would be coming right in one place. They're not gonna be mixed into everything else, which makes it really difficult. So I'd see one after another. So, it's really good, and then it actually saves the reporter a lot of time. You come back from the event, story's half done, all you have to do is write through it and tweak it and add, other stuff, instead of sitting down and writing a whole story fresh and trying to do it quickly.
And particularly with that, and we really want photos with everything, but in breaking news, the more photos, the better, because people want to see what's going on out there. And so the more visuals you can give, the more visuals we can pull back here and get on our website and really serve our audience well. So yeah, that's all great stuff too. After the event, make sure you continue to work with the folks that you have been following, that were part of that event. It's just kind of basic source development. Again, it's like any other source. You don't always want to just call them when you need something. You want to interact with them and all the time, and really build up that. And then always make sure that you tweet out your final story with that photo link so folks can see, the analysis that you've added in, or that final product that is the summation of that event. And I think sometimes we don't always do that quite so well. And particularly, with spot news, if Mary goes out and covers something, Sue crafts a story about it, Jess is working the night shift that night, so she ends up writing the final story, even though Mary started out. Make sure you're tweeting out that link to that final event, even though it ends up being Jess's story, because your audience is engaged in what's going on. There is a thing called Twitter jail, if you're not familiar with it. Basically, your account gets locked for up to 24 hours. And it happens if you tweet 100 tweets in an hour or 1,000 in a day. And your page is still up, you just are not allowed to tweet. And I did have one reporter who ended up in Twitter jail all the time. So he also would write 2,500 word blog posts. So he was the fastest typist I've ever seen, and he is a very smart guy, but he got put in Twitter jail. So it's highly unlikely that any of us will be tweeting that much, but just so you know, it does exist. Yeah.
The Gazette got permission to live tweet some trials, some really high profile trials. And the court reporter had 3 different Twitter accounts, changing to Lance Benzel 2, changing to Lance Benzel 3, because he'd hit his limit on those, because he was tweeting the whole trial.
And if you're not expecting it, it is the most frustrating thing, because it typically happens during major news.
Yeah.
And you're like, geez, So,
The revolution, come on.
I know, right? So, how much you should tweet? Again, this this can go any which way, really. How important is your event to users? How important is it to our community? How interesting is the event? If it's droning on and you're tweeting boring stuff, maybe tweet a little less often from that event. If it's a county meeting and people are throwing insults left and right, yeah, you want to be tweeting the heck out of that because it's interesting and it's a little bit different. So, like anything else, you guys have to decide what's going on at the event itself.
And if you're getting a lot of retweets, that's a sign that people are interested in sending that info out.
And, if it's something that you cover and you're the authority, you probably want to tweet more than something else. Like, if you're the education reporter and it's an education event, people are following you because they know you're the education reporter. So they're looking at you for that information. Versus if Shane goes to cover an education thing, his audience is not necessarily looking for that, so he might want to tweet a little bit less. So So moving forward, we do want, and I think we do this pretty well anyway, but at least one event a month, we want you guys to live tweet. I think particularly those of you that have meetings do that pretty regularly. Sports, who's not here, we want to live tweet at least one event a week. They do that pretty well right now also. And then photo, at least one tweet from each event with their art. Now, obviously, from breaking news, we always want you to live tweet. And it's really easy, particularly reporters, to tweet one photo and then kind of forget about the art aspect because you're like, oh, it's just, there's 3 ambulances now instead of 1. Keep sending that art. That really engages our audience. So, questions? Comments?
So, what hashtags have people found in this town that have traction? Because, Durango by itself is Durango, Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always use Durango Co. and for Durango, Colorado, but I haven't found a ton of other people there. And I know the radio station promotes So Durango, but there's a lot of times when hashtag So Durango is not what you want to be using.
Yes.
3-car crash, So Durango, yeah, so
I mean, Durango Co. is a good one. I would continue to do that. We are not, as much as we do get a lot of traffic from Twitter to our website, Durango's not a huge Twitter audience. So it is a lot more of those, Colorado Sports, Colorado Ledge, those kind of bigger statewide things. That said, you can always, FLC is obviously a good one.
I tag them whenever appropriate, in the hopes that they will, retweet me. They do that maybe once every 10 tweets, maybe.
That's good, though.
Is it just FLC, or do they just?
It's they have a couple college handles.
Yeah, I know they have a couple of different ones.
I was using the general one for the Miss Joni pageant, and that's the best coverage they could hope for ever, and they nothing.
Yeah,
And
they're not very savvy.
part of that is looking before you go out and to see, so I just searched for hashtag FLC, and so
Yeah.
you can see that's not really a popular Port Louis College one. So if you're, and this is search.twitter.com is where I went, or you can just go to Twitter and go to the right.
Live as well, though.
What?
You should hit live as well if you're trying to see what's
Thank
current.
you.
Yeah.
So somewhere
Didn't
there.
change any.
But right now, let's do Prince.
Well, yeah.
Crazy. That's just gonna be going so fast, you won't be able to even.
Oh, there's not a lot of hashtags on there. So let's do. Oh, stop. Sorry.
A good one for weather, when you have severe weather, is COWX. Because everybody's on that all over the state.
Gosh, I can't.
And then Coledge, COLEG is one for
That's a good one.
Anything politics is good. I think there's a CO
So we're
politics.
definitely the biggest hashtag Durango Co. users, which is good.
I wouldn't hesitate to use statewide ones that you find are active, because people here will follow those because they're looking for statewide stuff. Twitter users will follow because, it gives them information that they like.
Oh yeah,
Use
well, it's
that
all
catchy
Mexico.
stuff like-
Searching before you go is a really good way, but again, because we are such a pretty small community, there's not a lot of hashtags that are super niche to us. So, Sue's advice to use a statewide one is pretty spot on. Particularly with weather, because people do want to know what the
Weather,
weather's like
politics,
everywhere.
legislature, that kind of stuff, anything that's.
So,
What do we use
sorry,
for Gold
that's not
King?
a perfect answer for
Did we use a
you.
Gold King one?
We had hashtag Animus River, that was really, we said it and it, wildfire, did really well.
Okay.
And we also had Gold King Spill that we set. The great part is we get to decide
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's fine.
Particularly with
And if
breaking
if
news, yeah.
People are following it, that's good, and using it. And they will for big events like that.
Yeah.
They'll pick up whatever's being used, if they're Twitter users.
So, all right. Live video, learn to be broadcasters, 2 weeks.